All right, good afternoon, everyone. First off, we're going to do introductions of myself and my colleagues. Unfortunately, we won't have time to have all the participants introduce themselves, but if you want to just type your name, organization, or whatever you think is information that would be helpful in the chat, that would be great. We have 30 minutes and we're hoping to actually spend most of this time to give you an opportunity to ask us questions. And so first off, my name is Blish Lassette. I am a program manager within public health. I work both with the Healthy Safe Environments as well as with communities of opportunity. I'll pass it on to my colleague, Robin.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. It's so great to see so many folks here today. I'm Robin Hegwood, and I'm a project manager with the Healthy and Safe Environments team and work a little bit with the COO team, Communities of Opportunity team as well. And I'll pass it to Nainona.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nainona Bourgeois, and I'm a project manager on the Healthy Safe Environments team, along with Robin. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. So the way we're going to do this, I'm going to give a little bit of a summary of what Healthy Safe Environments is, and my colleagues will provide a bit more context. And then we will talk a little bit about eligibility and timeline, and then open it up for questions. So first off, Healthy and Safe Environments, also known as HSE, is a BSK initiative working with community partners to create healthier communities for youth, families, by using youth-led policy systems and environmental change strategies. And we know that health and well-being are influenced by places in which we live, learn, work, and play, and that our health is also impacted by racism and other forms of inequities experienced by our communities. Communities, including homes, schools, and public spaces, can be transformed by those impacted to support the well-being of children, youth, young adults, and families. And so the Policy Systems and Environmental Change Strategy, the PSC strategy, is a way of modifying the environments to make healthy choices practical and available to all community members. So this BSK funding opportunity is about creating a safe and health promoting environment across King County for all. And now I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Nainona.
So policy systems and environmental change, often referred to as PSE. You might be wondering what this is. And so to elaborate, policy change includes the passing of laws, ordinances, resolutions, mandates, regulations, rules. These could include both big P at the state, county, or city level, or little p that happen at the organizational level. Systems change involves changes made to the rules within an organization. These changes could include modifications to programs to improve the quality or increase the scale. Environmental change is a change made to the physical environment. For example, building modifications to make facilities more accessible or less harmful. Policy systems change funded projects are different than projects that focus entirely on programming or direct services. We often refer to policy systems environmental changes as upstream approaches because what happens upstream impacts the outcomes that happen downstream. Instead of responding to the individual impacted by the upstream problem, PSE projects aim to focus on the root cause. This changes the focus from the individual and the short-term level to a long-term and community population solution. For example, as an alternative to celebrating a National Nutrition Month through programming, fruits and vegetables could be added to the a la carte menu in school, district-wide, thus removing barriers to make the healthy choice the easy choice. And treating, in place of treating one person, you are shifting the norms within a population to impact hundreds and even thousands of people over longer periods of time. Important to note that HSE funded grantees have enter their projects or the start of their projects at different place in the kind of PSE spectrum. Some are ready on day one, right? Have the issue identified. They've got their base ready for organizing and hit the ground running. Whereas other grantees may have the issue identified, right? But are still organizing their base and creating awareness within the community. And in both of those, right? Like the value within HSE is to really prioritize capacity building, right? So us as a team will work with grantees to increase skills, to even provide expertise, right, through different types of partnerships to help them create greater impact and deepening the work that they're doing. Across HSE funded projects, we have found that the ones that are the most successful are those that work in and are strengthened by partnerships. Important to note that this strategy does not fund direct services through programs of programs of organizations are often used to bolster PSE efforts. So in that example, you would have a program that supports, for example, a youth-led policy council, and you would use that program to leverage in a way that elevates awareness within the community on the PSE issue and helps to mobilize and advocate for the change. If you could move to the next slide, please, Robin, I'd really appreciate that. So on this slide, we have examples of HSE funded projects that have happened in the setting of schools and community. Other settings for community have included healthcare, places of worship, and after-school programs. And so I'm just going to share out on 3 of these examples. In the school setting at the district level, modifications were made to the alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs policy to address disproportionate disciplinary actions for all students, with an emphasis on students of color, right? Because that's where the disproportionality lies. This project focused on changing how school administrators implemented the discipline policy. The trainings were conducted across the school district to also help identify substance abuse issues and provide services in-house to students, while also prioritizing that kind of emphasis on keeping students in school, right, to create better outcomes. 2 of our grantees worked in school districts to adopt evidence-based trauma-informed PE curriculum and incorporate equipment like heart rate monitors. And this example, PE moved from the subjective grading to one that was more objective. Students were measured not in comparison to other students, but rather measured by their own progress, right? And it also created space to look at the unique needs of children. For example, a child with asthma could be seen and supported in a way that accounted for that reality. And the example of the group of Native youth that work to increase visibility and representation in their community, they educated the City of Seattle's Landmark Board about the importance of a historically sacred site called Licton Springs, which resulted in the designation of the Licton Springs site as the first landmark designation honoring the Indigenous people of the Seattle area. I will now pass it off to Robin. You're muted, Robin.
Thank you, Ninona. Thanks, Ninona, for providing those examples. I'm going to go over how the work is different and some of the tactics we use. So, you know, for many organizations, this work is new, and for other organizations, it's not. But really, the characteristics of our programs and the work we are trying to fund is more along those lines of policy, systems, and environment change. While events or programs are important to engage the community, they're often one time or over a shortened period of time. They're additive, so they often only relate in short-term behavior change because the where decisions are being made hasn't also been changed. They're often on the individual level. They could be one-offs that are not necessarily part of an ongoing plan. They tend to be short-term, and they're not very well sustained if your funding goes away. And so what we do in HSE is think about how can these things be ongoing? How do these projects add to your overall mission as an organization or overall goal of policy systems or environment change? They're often foundational. So they ensure that the decisions that folks make it's basically making the healthiest choice, the easier choice, rather than asking people to go above and beyond barriers to reach what they need. They tend to be at the population or community level. So it takes movements, it takes power and multiplicity of people in order to create this kind of change. So often there's a lot of base building that can go on. Like I said, it's part of an ongoing plan. It's long-term. And once that change is created, it can be sustained over time. So investing in change at the PSE level means that when the funding goes away and you've completed a project like this, that change is sustained. So how does this work? What does this work look like? So some elements of PSE work, PSE change include, it generally is community driven or youth led and equity anti-racist focused. So we're looking at, like Nainona said, the root causes. And in order to understand the root causes, it has to be the people who are experiencing those root causes at the greatest level, being a part of creating that change. Coalitions are really important in this work because, again, it has to do with power sharing and creating a base that moves something forward, whether it's a policy, a system change, or an environmental change. Often we work toward initially identifying barriers and opportunities for that change to give us a clear idea of where we can focus some of the work that we're doing. Awareness raising is huge. Sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And so raising awareness in that base of people who are going to be your change makers is really important. And then what happens when that change happens? How do we move forward? What are we putting in place if we're removing something that is creating a barrier to ensure sustainability over time? And then partnership and implementation is huge. And I know I think talked a little bit about it, but partnership and authentic, strong partnership tends to create a larger swath of change across a different community and have a longer sustaining power. Some of the tactics we use are messaging and reframing. Data and story collection and media influence are huge. If we can share stories and pair them with data, it's a really powerful way to change policy. And, in the same way we're talking about youth-led equity, anti-racist focused, that's grassroots organizing, right? Coalitions advocating for change. So like I said, coalitions really working to identify what those barriers are, what those opportunities are, and then advocating for that change. And then, there's this idea of diffusion of innovations. So if you think about the COVID vaccine, we had an innovation and we have early folks who are like, yeah, give me that vaccine. We have people who are like, I don't know about that vaccine. And then we have other folks who are like, absolutely not, I'm not getting that vaccine. And so there's actually a theory around this that the more you are able to diffuse information about that vaccine and diffuse positive stories and a positive narrative, then more people will uptake that. And so this has to do a lot with norms change, which is another big key element of policy systems change. Norms can change either before policy changes or be changed by policy. So they work both in tandem that way. So I'll pass it back to Blishta and she can get into the specifics of eligibility and timeline. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. So in terms of applicants, this opportunity would be open to CBOs, both private and nonprofit. Schools and school districts can apply, as well as city and governmental type organizations. This is also open to tribes and tribal organizations. As my colleagues have talked about, some of the things that are not eligible, and that's more like research projects that's focused on construction or capital projects are not part of HSE funding. Any project that's around individual or direct service would not be. And we cannot fund any work that would supplant another county funding. So it cannot replace another project that you're working on if you've lost funding for that project and you just wanting to sort of add this money in. And it cannot be used for lobbying, and we'll, in the RFP as well as in information sessions, we'll be very specific in terms of what we mean by that. And so going to the next slide, we are sort of trying to figure out this timeline. And as you can imagine, these dates are subject to change. Our goal is to try to release this RFP sometime by the end of March, early April. We are looking to either have the RFP out for 5 or 6 weeks. And so we're looking at, the week of May 2nd or the week of May 3rd would be, May 9th would be the due time. And then we'll spend the month of June really doing reviewing of the applications. We might have to do some site visits if we have many applications and we're trying to make some decisions with the hope of letting folks know as soon as possible in June around if you were selected, with the plan of starting our contracts on July 1st. And so I think those are basically the key slides that we have. And now we can open it up to questions. Feel free to get your, take yourself off of mute. If you also want to type the questions in the chat, feel free to do that as well. So I'll open it up for questions now.
This is Hamdi. Hello.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, Blishta.
Hi.
I have a question. My interest is community organizing, and I would like to have more picture around what is expected in that category.
Around community organizing?
Yes.
It would need to be community organizing for a purpose. And so you'd need to be able to describe sort of what is the systems change that you're looking for? What is the policy change? Is there an environment that you're trying to improve or create? And so if you can show how that community organizing links to that specific outcome, then that's how you would be able to demonstrate that work.
So one example that I want to give you is, before even we go to systems, sometimes having an organized community that understands the concept of being organized it has become a challenge over the years, and it's a challenge for many reasons, which include needing more education around what is the benefit of being organized. What can you do by organizing yourself? So does this need to be tied to organizing the community, helping them understand what it means, and then also focusing on some work that they need to do to prove that that work has happened and community understood, and whether they meet the goal or not, they have taken some actions?
So we're looking at funding for about 2.5 years, maybe even 3 years, depending on how we sort of lay out the RFP. And so our goal is that by the end of the funding period, that you have moved the needle in some direction. Yes, it is hard to sometimes predict how some organizing work will result. However, we want to see a path that shows us that that community is moving towards creating a change.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? And I can also look in the chat to see if there are any questions that came up.
There was a question about whether community-based organizations can partner with schools around this work. And
Absolutely.
I answered yes there. We really strongly encourage partnerships. And we often encourage the community-based partnership to be in the lead when working with larger institutions. Anything to add on that, Blishta? I'm going to stop sharing so that we can see people a little better.
Yeah.
I know we provided a lot of information in a short period of time, and it might take you a few minutes to process this. And so if after this, open house, you want to sort of go back and reflect, these open house sessions will be recorded so you can sort of review at your leisure and see if there's specific things that you want to get a better understanding of. And then I'm trying to figure out how we can then respond to questions that might come up between now and the time that the RFP is released. We have a little bit more flexibility to have conversations about the process. But once the RFP is released, then we meaning myself, Robin, and Nynona, are not in a position to really speak more on the RFP process. So if there are ideas or questions you have and you want clarification, we can do our best to help you. However, once we get into specifics or details, that's less likely to be something that we can do.
And some of you may know this, others might be new to Best Starts for Kids, but there will be TA providers available for application. So as you're applying, look for technical assistance providers who will be aware of the grant, be aware of what we're looking for, and be able to support people through the sort of paperwork of applying. So keep that in mind as well.
Thank you. Thanks for that reminder, Robin. And also during the RFP release time, there is an opportunity to ask questions, and the questions need to come in through a specific process through our procurement office, and then it needs to be written, and then we send back a written response as part of an addendum within the application process. So everyone will see the questions that are asked, and everyone will have an opportunity to see how the questions were answered.
Okay.
So in terms of the types of systems or policy that you can include, HSE is creating healthy and safe environments. And so policies that reflect that, and of course the policies also need to be youth-led. And so we're looking for projects that really, where youth are playing an integral part in the development and the implementation. And historically, HSE has looked at healthy eating, active living. We've looked at sort of reducing exposure to harmful substances, such as alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, and other drugs. Also reducing exposure to unsafe materials, and that could include firearms or toxins. And then we have what we call our fourth strategy, which sort of it's a catch-all. It's basically creating safe and health promoting environments. And that's the space where folks who've done work on healthy housing, who've done work around inclusion for children of various abilities. They've fallen under that category. And so it's pretty, there's a lot of flexibility. I mean, I would say as long as the work that you're proposing is around impacting inequities, it is youth-led, community-led, and you can demonstrate that it is, it will again have an impact in whatever the population you select, whether it's in a specific racial, ethnic population or in a various cultural population, as long as you can show how that impacts the population that you're looking at. It could be city or town as well. So that's how we're looking at it.
And then there's a question about tools and resources for guiding you through the systems change process. And our intention is really to provide a lot of resources around policy systems and environment change. And then there is that added element of working with young people. And in the past 6 years, we've had multiple projects that have been youth-led, where there's definitely the element of awareness raising for young people that is very important. And then providing them tools and then having them do the work. So all three of us have done a lot of that work and can provide assistance and guidance around that. We do have a pretty accessible, we have because this work is so complex, we have a fewer number of organizations generally in our portfolio than a lot of the other BSK grant monitors. And so that allows us to provide as much sort of capacity building and guidance as we can. So that's another key piece of our work, is that we do a lot of connecting to resources, training, capacity building, that sort of thing around this to ensure folks can be successful.
So I see a comment from Tamika. So for your project, for your organization, in order to sort of qualify for HSE funding, you would need to think about how you would expand that work. We are looking for going beyond educating around nutrition and healthy eating, but around changing systems, improving systems, environments that actually make it easier, more accessible to communities. So that would be the angle that you would need to focus on if you're applying for this type of funding.
Okay, thank you.
It is 1:30, but we can hang out here for if there are any other questions, but do not feel obligated to hang around if you don't have specific questions. Thank you so much for coming to hear about healthy, safe environments. As I mentioned, our hope is to release an RFP in end of March, early April. And so once that RFP is released, we'll most likely have information sessions, which will be another opportunity to ask questions and to get better clarification around how you best would fit into this specific proposal funding opportunity. So yes, so feel free to, again, if you want to have an opportunity to review this video, and if you want to get a better understanding of it, that will be available. And I'm not sure exactly how you'll access that information, but I think our colleague, Kerry Wade, who's pulling all this together, will probably have it sent out in one of our BSK blogs or in some form or fashion to make sure you have access to this, as well as any other open house conversations that have been taking place today and beyond. And yes, funding is planned to begin on July 1st.
There was also a question about how much, so it's a range right now.
How much funding that's available will really rely on a couple of things. What we've done in the past is we've funded programs up to $150,000 for a year and a half. we're looking to do funding, as I said, either for 2.5 or maybe 3 years. And so kind of do the math that way. We can kind of get a sense of what that funding will look like. There's some partners who've only for the 18 months have only needed $60,000 to do the work that they were proposing. And so they've been funded for that amount. So we don't really have a minimum in terms of how much. You imagine that most people probably will request at least 25,000. And again, in terms of the number of years, it could be up to 200,000 to 300,000, depending on how many applications we get and whether we decide to go 2.5 years or 3 years. So I'm hoping to see as many of you in apply or at least attend any type of information session once this RFP is released. I think it will provide you with a lot more information, a lot more detail, and you can see if this is a good fit for you. So thank you so much for attending today's info session. Open house for healthy and safe environments.